Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. I am Justin Seeger, co host of Dipstick Debates and writer for Racing Refresh. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Ray Alfalla, four-time champion of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Ray, how are you today?
Hey, Justin, I'm doing well. How about you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here. First of all, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into motorsports?
Right. So I basically, like racing ever since I was a little kid, playing with diecasts and when I had my first console, which was like a Sega Genesis, first thing I gravitated towards was like Road Rash. Sonic was on there by default, and that was cool too because he was fast. He was racing around and all these games, and I just always liked racing. Ever since I was a baby, I was just play with toy cars, and it was just kind of, I don't know, it was just wired that way. And um, so obviously that turned into discovering uh, discovering that the diecast that I would play with was based on like a real racing series. That turning into watching NASCAR, watching open wheel and basically just ever since I could remember being a person, I just enjoyed cars and racing in general.
A little follow-up question to that. How did that lead you into iRacing?
Right. So basically, I was playing all those video games in the late '90s as a kid, and then in the early 2000s, I remember NASCAR Racing 4 came out, and that was from Papyrus, now known as iRacing, but it was from the 2001 season. I remember looking at that game, and they made like huge strides in the graphics in NASCAR 4 compared to like NASCAR 3, which was from like 1999. Um, but in '01, I didn't have a good enough computer to, it was just pretty much PlayStation. That's all I had as far as, so I saw that as kind of like, well, maybe one day I'll have a good enough computer for that. And then finally in 2003, um, my parents were able to buy a good enough computer, and then we also got broadband internet for the first time in 2003, which I didn't know that you could actually race on a 56K modem before that. I thought it was just like not even possible, but apparently people did race on it. But it's probably good that I saved my parents a lot of money on phone bills because I didn't know that was a thing. But yeah, so I got into what was NASCAR racing 2003 at that point, and that kind of started my online racing career. And I mean, I started with a keyboard. I remember seeing people with wheels and thinking, oh, that'd be so awesome to be able to actually control your car instead of having to hit keys on the keyboard. Uh, and I got my first wheel in 2003 for Christmas. Um, and yeah, it was off from there, and then it was off to racing in different leagues and getting banned off of several leagues because I was too fast, and the 50-year-old guys got mad and they would just kick the kid out, and that was kind of my story for a while till I got into the more difficult leagues on 2K3 on NASCAR 2003. And then eventually got invited to DMP, which is Dale Juniors League in 2006. Had success in all those, and then iRacing started in 2008, and then we kind of everybody just kind of moved on to iRacing at the people that were in 2K3 just kind of all gravitated over to iRacing. Um, so I always say that I never actually experienced being a rookie on iRacing because everybody was just there. Everybody was a rookie at once, and it was just the same people that we were driving with before, but in a different software. So uh, yeah, I guess I'm one of the founders of the whole thing.
Absolutely. So, being a professional iRacer, how do you feel that um, is there a really solid comparison to actual motorsports, or are there like key differences between the two?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always thought, back I mean back when iRacing first started, and even before that, that it was extremely similar. And you would see Dale Jr. on there, you would see Denny Hamlin on there a lot when he was first getting started in NASCAR. You'd see Martin Truex, Brad Keselowski on there. And those guys, they would race on there, and this is kind of before. I mean, Junior was already big time, but I mean, Junior's a huge nerd. He just likes he's liked computer since like the late '90s. He's like a dinosaur compared to all these guys. But these other guys were kind of getting started in NASCAR, and they were really into sim racing, and then they got very busy with their actual NASCAR career and stuff. But I could just tell back then, just the basics of driving a car around the track and knowing knowing where to place your car, how to hit an apex, just things like that really transfer so well in any. This is it's not just iRacing. It's not just pretty much any racing game that's like decent as far as driving physics go. You learn a lot as far as how to race, how to hit a corner. If the physics are advanced enough, you learn how to correct a car that's loose, or how to manage your tires, things like that. A lot of that really transfers over, and people who sim race or people who play racing games competitively really have a deeper understanding of what the real life drivers are going through, much more so, in my opinion, that somebody who just shows up and watches a race.
So, how many, as a professional iRacer, I imagine you spend a lot of time practicing. How much time do you put in practicing for one event?
Yeah, well, I can tell you it's a whole lot less once I started working at the post office. That's I'd say the biggest difference, the biggest challenge now is I'm no longer in high school, and I'm no longer in college, and a lot of these guys in the series are, and I remember what that was like, and that was a lot of free time. Especially once you got to college, and you just basically got to pick like when your classes were, and you just like scheduled that around your racing, scheduled that around whenever racing was. So no classes on Tuesday nights, no, or so and so is for practice, and you don't get that luxury once you start working. But with that being said, obviously, I have a really good team at Legacy Esports, and there's a lot of guys on there that do have the time, and it all depends on which stage of your life you're at. What's going on in your life. If you're a bit younger now, I'm in my 30s now, so it's different. The guys are in their early 20s. So those guys have a lot more time to test, and I try to use them to help me out as much as possible. And then whenever I'm on to practice, I'll give the best feedback that I can give. But yeah, all these guys in the eNASCAR series, they're all usually in pretty big teams. And if they're not themselves putting in a lot of time, somebody else is, because it's really difficult to make these cars go fast week after week. Requires a lot of effort. So it really just depends on what team dynamic you have. But I know personally, the biggest change for me, the biggest challenge has been trying to handle having a full-time job and still racing professionally at the highest level.
Right. So you mentioned you throughout your career on iRacing, you've driven for different teams. You've won 2 championships with Junior Motorsports and 2 more with Slip Angle. Now, of course, you're with Gibbs Gaming. All right, what's it like driving for different teams in iRacing? Is it pretty similar in terms of like the responsibilities you have, or is it different?
Right. So yeah, I mean that's a loaded question, because like, for example, when I say Legacy Esports, it's kind of the technical side of the setups, but I'm representing Joe Gibbs Racing. And since 2019, the official teams came in, but the drivers already kind of had the people they were working with. So now you have a dynamic where people represent the same team, or they're different teams officially, but they're still like working together, in setups and things like that. So uh, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to get along with whoever you work with. I think for me, it's always been a priority, um, because if you have to, the anytime that you jump on to do laps, you want to be doing laps with people that you get along with. That's just kind of, if you can control that, obviously you'd really want people that you enjoy being around with, that will really people that will be able to bounce ideas, that you'll be able to bounce ideas off of each other. without much conflict. And there's always conflict. There's always people that have different opinions on things, setup wise, or I mean, a lot of times you'll be racing against the people that you work with too. Um, so I mean, I've been in teams that we've had post-race fights, pre-race fights, during the race fights, and you try to avoid that. You try to definitely not get into the people that you're working with on the track, but sometimes that's difficult, especially when you get into these teams that some of these teams out here have like 10 drivers. Um, and if they're fast, then they're all going to be like close, especially, close to the front in the race. So they'll be fighting for a top 5, fighting for the win, things like that. And then you're also representing different organizations on the eNASCAR side. So there's already like a rivalry there where like you're working together on setups, but you want to beat them because that means more prizes and more more success for the team you're representing. So it's a complicated dynamic, but at the end of the day, you need to be with people that you enjoy working with, and do your best to come out on top.
Absolutely. You had to balance the competition and the companionship there. You mentioned your stage in life and where you are now. Some iRacers have moved from a career in iRacing to driving in professional motorsports. William Byron, most notably in the Cup Series. Have you been offered to drive for a professional motorsports team, or have you considered a move?
So I for sure still want to get in a real car, um, and I've been saving money towards that, and so I intend to do that probably here in the next year or so. But no, I haven't been offered anything official as far as an opportunity, like any sort of development deal, things like that, which is kind of surprising. I would have thought um, that being successful at the highest level of eNASCAR sim racing, that there would have been more chances. But it's complicated. There's a lot of money involved, as you know, with real racing. So, um, but I'm still, my goals are still at least to get into short track racing, do some sort of racing, because my whole my whole passion into sim racing and what it's become, it all it all stemmed from wanting to drive in the real world, and for a lot of the guys that race on iRacing, that's always been the case, and sim racing allows you to race and get your racing fix in for a fraction of the cost. I mean, a tiny fraction of the cost. It's kind of crazy how much just like a tire costs in real life. It's a tire is like 4 years worth of iRacing subscription or something ridiculous like that. So, um, but with that being said, obviously racing a real car and experiencing, just from, basically I've done some karting, um, and a little bit of like my only full body car that I've actually taken around the track is a Miata with Ernie Francis Jr., who's racing in the SRX series. So he was like my driver coach back when he was like 15, 8 years ago or something, and he was already racing and stuff. So, but yeah, but just from that little taste I got and from the karting I did, obviously it's a huge adrenaline rush. You get back on the sim and it's so obvious that you're just sitting in your room and you're not going anywhere. Um, so yeah, I totally understand, the allure of real life racing, and I want to get into it at some point. So yeah, that's the plan.
Well, I don't know if any of us at Racing Refresh have any pull, but come on, guys! If anyone's watching, he's a four-time iRacing champion. Let's get him in a real ride. Um, I want to mention other NASCAR video games. I have not actually gotten into iRacing myself. With how with how much of a sim that iRacing is, do you go back and play like NASCAR Heat or other NASCAR, any other racing video games, or do you just stick to iRacing?
I usually just stick to iRacing. I do sometimes get with my friends and we'll go back and play NASCAR 2003, just to remind ourselves what it was like. And it's always more and more shocking to think that, wow, we actually drove this. Like, it's so different than iRacing. It's so simple. The car is not nearly as dynamic. For example, on iRacing, you go out into the corner and you kind of feel there's so many things that you're feeling in the suspension and the force feedback and how the car is moving and teetering and where like on the older games it was very very simplified. You'd go in there and the car would just it would just kind of get loose or tied, but it wasn't very complex and you could tell. But it's fun just going out there and kind of taking yourself back like 15 years. This is what I used to race and things like that. But I mean, overall, I don't really, I don't have much time. And when I do have the time, I try to just practice for the NASCAR series.
Right. So this is a question that has been proposed to many actual drivers in motorsports, especially in NASCAR. They've recently, since 2017, added in the playoff format into actual NASCAR, and iRacing has developed its own form of a playoff format. Do you prefer a certain points format for iRacing, or do you just kind of go with what you got?
I was actually a big proponent of adding playoffs to our series, just because selfishly I don't have the time for to I don't have the time to that I used to have. So with the format now, if you're able to get a win, I mean, that's hard enough. But like if you're able to get a win and you're able to stay in the top 20, um, not you can kind of just make it into the playoffs, and then from there you can focus. So it used to be where, uh, the my first three championships were every single race counted. Every single race counted. You had like a drop maybe. Sometimes we had two drops, so it was just like one drop usually. But every single race counted. And I remember in 2016, racing against PJ Sturgis, who was my teammate. It was we were out there like Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. It was like we would finish 1-2, 1-2-3, 1-3, and it came down to like he finished 14th twice, and I finished 14th like once. Um, and it came out to the very end, and I think he ended up winning the final race, and I finished second, and we won the championship by 2 points, something like that. It was ridiculous the whole year. So from there, I definitely was a big proponent of they're doing it in real life, so this is not something that would be different from real life. If anything, we're trying to emulate the real thing. So yeah, playoffs would be nice, and it'd be nice if the pressure just wouldn't be on completely the entire year, because I don't have the time I used to have.
Right, right. Um, so one final question I have for you is what advice would you give to someone who is looking to get into iRacing and be successful with it?
Yeah, sign up for VRS. um, yeah, well, I mean, that's actually it is a thing. I mean, any software that allows you to use to basically look at the top drivers in anything and see their inputs, see how they're driving, um, look at tutorials or things like that is a big help. And if you're not able to get a subscription for something like VRS, then just join a practice, see who the fastest drivers are, and get either follow them on the track or just look at the replay, go live with them, get inside their car, see what they're doing. um, and that's kind of, I mean, that's really what VRS is about, is learning. But in on VRS we put the best, the top drivers there, and you can just go straight to the website, and there's tutorials weekly. You can also have like one-on-one sessions. But before VRS was a thing, I always used to just, you have to completely swallow your pride and just say, okay, I suck. Who doesn't suck? Let me look at them.
Yeah.
What are they doing? Try to copy it the best possible way. And really just seat time. Go out there and drive. Go out there and make mistakes. I always say, anytime I'm coaching somebody or in my tutorial videos, take advantage of it being a sim. Go out there and hit the wall. Go out there and like down the straightaway, put your car up against the wall and see exactly where the right side of your car is. It's not going to cost you thousands of dollars. Nobody's gonna be mad at you when you come back to the pits. So take advantage of it being a sim and cut that learning curve. Drive over the limit, crash the car, it doesn't matter. Um, and that'll really cut down on your driving time, just being able to make those mistakes and drive way above your head in practice so that you get to the race and you know exactly where those limits are. You should never go into a race and be surprised by anything. You should have already practiced it. You should get your friends to practice crashing you on purpose just to see what that's like, for example. I mean, anything that you can think of that could happen in the race, it's literally something you can practice offline or with your friends. And so that's what I recommend.
That is great advice. Well, Mr. Alfalla, thank you for your time. Before I let you go, tell us where people can find you on social media.
Yeah, so basically just Ray Alfalla on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm mostly active on Twitter on there, and I like interacting with people. Just about racing or about anything really. I like to post memes. So that's a good fun time. So yeah, find me on there, and thank you so much for having me on, Justin.
Thank you for being here. We hope to see you again real soon. Be sure to check out Racing Refresh on YouTube, our website. Be sure to check out everything that we've got going on. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day.